Well, good morning, everyone. Happy Friday morning to you, and welcome back to another session of Now TV and Morning Musings. My name is Don K. Preston. I'm the president of Preterist Research Institute of Ardmore, Oklahoma. I really appreciate you being with me. I hope that you will. I hope that you will subscribe to our channel. I hope that you will hit a like as it's posted on YouTube and what have you. Our audience is slowly growing, and we appreciate that so very, very much. More and more people are tuning in, not only to watch, but more and more people are tuning in because they are learning the exciting, thrilling, gratifying, fulfilling message of fulfilled Bible prophecy. So we've been involved, still are, in an extended study of the challenge of Christ. The challenge of Christ is stated very clearly in John 10 and verse 37. Do not believe me, Jesus said, for my words' sake. Believe me for my works. If I do not do the works which the Father has given me, do not believe me. That's the whole point of what Jesus was saying. His words are not enough. He must do. He must fulfill what he said he was going to do, or else we're not even supposed to believe in him. Now, as I pointed out before, folks, this is a truly unique challenge. The Muslims don't make that challenge. The Jews come closer to issuing that challenge. But you see, Jesus was a Jew. He taught Torah, lived Torah, fulfilled Torah. And so other religions, Hinduism, Buddhism, none of the major religions issue and stand on a challenge that matches the challenge of Christ. But of course, as I've been sharing with you for a good long while now, atheists, Muslims, even Jews say Jesus did not do what he said he was going to do. Just this morning, all right? I've been corresponding, if you want to call it that, an individual who claims to be a Christian. And yet, when confronted with all of the New Testament time statements, Jesus' own statements that he was going to come back in that generation, pardon me, first century generation, just flat out said he did not say that. Well, the words are right there. They're on the text. They're even in red. And yet this individual says, but he didn't do it. Listen to me, folks. This is a man who claims to be a Christian, denying that Jesus kept his word. Well, that means that the Muslim and the Jew and the skeptic and the atheist is right. Jesus either lied or he failed. Period. End of story. And so we've been examining how Jesus could have kept his word. We've examined, first of all, how the language of Christ coming on the clouds with the angels, with the shout, etc., was never intended to be taken literally. In other words, Jesus was never predicting that he was going to come back as a 5'5" Jewish man. Oh, by the way, just a real quick thing. I've had people say, well, how do you know Jesus was a 5'5" Jewish man? You're just mocking. No, I'm not mocking. The average height of a Jewish man in the first century had been that way for a couple of centuries. According to archaeology, according to historians, the average height was 5'5" to 5'7". I am in no way mocking. I'm using historical reality. So, the point being, Jesus never predicted that he was going to come back in a physical body at the end of time, riding out of heaven on a literal physical cumulus cloud. That is a gross misunderstanding of the Hebraic apocalyptic language, which was poetic, metaphoric, figurative, whatever term you would like to use, and was not intended to be taken literally. What we have also been focused on for the last several videos is Daniel chapter 9 and the wider book and books of the Tanakh that set the appointed time for the coming of the Lord, the judgment, the resurrection, the kingdom, the new creation. And we've been focusing on this really, really key fact, this linguistic fact of the kairos. Kairos means divinely appointed time. I have shared with you how Daniel especially set the appointed time for the kingdom, the judgment, etc. Daniel 2, days of the fourth empire. Daniel 7, days of the fourth empire, the little horn would arise, persecute the saints, be slain at the coming of the Lord. Now look, folks, I'm sorry. This is one of those slam dunk situations. Daniel 7, 13 and 14, the coming of the Son of Man on the clouds of heaven to receive the kingdom. Okay? Got that? In the days of the fourth kingdom, coming of the Son of Man, in the judgment of the little horn, to receive the kingdom. Jesus came in the days of the Roman Empire, the fourth kingdom, in his incarnation. He said he was going to come on the clouds of heaven and destroy all covenant Israel and Jerusalem, the persecuting power, i.e. the little horn. And he said he was going to do it in that generation. So Daniel set the appointed time, days of the Roman Empire. Jesus said he's coming on the clouds would be in that generation, in the days of the fourth empire. It doesn't get any simpler than that, ladies and gentlemen. It just doesn't. Well, anyway, got to move on here. So we've been examining Daniel chapter 9, which counted off and foretold a period of 490 years. In that 490 years, Israel's covenantal history was going to be consummated and brought to a glorious consummation by the establishment of the everlasting kingdom of God, the bringing in of everlasting righteousness. But commensurate and synonymous, or not synonymous, but synchronous with that, would be other realities. Now remember, all of these are set within the determined time. 70 weeks are determined. That word from the Hebrew is katak. Cut out, as I've shared with you. That's the divinely appointed time for the coming in of the new creation. It is also the time, as the last two videos have demonstrated, for the fulfillment of all prophecy. Now, does anyone deny that the coming of the new heaven and new earth is the time of the fulfillment of all prophecy? I'm not aware of anybody that denies that. And we'll get to that bringing in of everlasting righteousness as we continue our study. But for now, let's focus again on that phrase, 70 weeks are determined to seal, vision, and prophecy. Now, I've written a book on this, Seal It, Vision, and Prophecy. In this book, as I've already shared with you ever so slightly and ever so briefly, in this book, I demonstrate that the term seal, vision, and prophecy, there is I won't say universal, but there is an incredibly widespread consensus among Hebrew scholars that phrase in the Hebrew means to put an end to the prophetic office by the fulfillment of all prophecy, so that no further prophecy is necessary. Do you catch the power of that? Daniel is predicting the end of the prophetic office through the fulfillment of all prophecy. No more prophecy after that. I'm sometimes taken somewhat aback. I don't know why it should be. I get used to hearing a little bit of everything. But when I hear people jump up today and say, well, I'm the prophet this or I'm the prophetess that, excuse me, no, you're not. Sometimes it just have to be a little blunt. There are no living, inspired, infallible prophets alive in the world today, and there haven't been since AD 70. I'm more than willing and happy to defend that statement in debate. It's just not possible. Okay. 70 weeks are determined to seal vision and prophecy. What I want to do then is to examine the correlation between Daniel 9 and its prediction and what the New Testament has to say about this time of the fulfilling of all prophecy, thus bringing the prophetic office to its close. So we've examined the definition of the Hebrew words. We have seen what they mean. And I demonstrated to you last week this prophecy of Daniel chapter 9 cannot be about the time of Antiochus Epiphanes. Absolutely cannot be. You know why? Because all prophecy was not fulfilled. And that, you see, people, many commentators, the liberal commentators, the skeptical commentators mostly, they tell us that Daniel 9 is not even messianic. And unfortunately, there are some who call themselves Christians, some who call themselves even conservative Christians, who agree that Daniel chapter 9 had nothing to do with the coming of Jesus. It was all, supposedly, fulfilled in the time of Antiochus Epiphanes. So we examined that last week initially. And I demonstrated for you that Daniel chapter 9 said that by the end of that 70-week period, the atonement would be made. Sin would be put away. Well, guess what? The time of Antiochus Epiphanes, once again, when the liberal scholars tell us Daniel 9 was fulfilled, that was supposed to be fulfilled in the time of Onias III. Some call him Onias IV. I can never get a firm handle on it. It's either Onias III or Onias IV. But here's the point. Let me reiterate this from last week. This is so incredibly important. Onias was the very last of the fully qualified, duly authorized high priest in Israel. But Onias was slain. The man who took his place by the name of Jason was a co-conspirator in Onias's death, in his violent removal from the office of high priest. Jason and Menelaus were both frauds. They were fakes. They were not qualified. That means they were men of violence. No man of violence could be a high priest, ladies and gentlemen. That's Jewish law. And yet both of these men were men of violence. They were horribly unjust, horribly dishonest. They're not qualified to make the atonement. So if and when people say, oh, well, Daniel 9 was fulfilled in the time of Antiochus Epiphanes and the death of Onias, who is supposedly the prince that was cut off in the middle of the week, it won't work because there was no priest to make the atonement, to put away sin. And by the way, once again, all prophecy was not fulfilled in the time of Onias, in the time of Antiochus Epiphanes. Many Old Testament prophecies remained to be fulfilled after the time of Antiochus Epiphanes. And so the skeptics, the liberals, say, oh, well, the prophecy of Daniel 9 is predicting the time of the fulfillment of one specific prophecy. Well, I shared with you last week that's absolutely untenable. The grammar, the linguistics of Daniel 9 forbid that view because it is not 70 weeks are determined to seal the vision and the prophet, as if it is referring to Jeremiah chapter 29, verse 10, the specific prophecy of Daniel 9. No, it's not there. No definite article. That means, according to the wide range of scholarship, that Daniel is not predicting the fulfillment of a singular prophet. He is predicting the fulfillment of all prophecy. Then we are told, well, Daniel was predicting the fulfillment of the prophecies concerning the destruction of Jerusalem. Well, that's certainly true. The end thereof of the city shall be with the flood. Desolations are determined until the time of the end, until the appointed kairos. It's Suntalia Kairu in the Septuagint of Daniel 9. The consummation of the appointed time. What was the appointed time? The 490 days. Desolations are determined until the end, the consummation of the appointed time. That means that the destruction of Jerusalem is the end of the appointed time of the 490 days. It cannot mean that the 70 weeks ended in 34 or 35 AD, because desolations didn't take place at that time. But Daniel is told desolations are determined until the time of the end. Doesn't work. Okay. So while it's true that Daniel was certainly foretelling the fulfillment of prophecy, what we have to keep in mind is this. And I wrote this other book, ladies and gentlemen. These are the days in which all things written must be fulfilled. That is from Luke 21 and verse 22. Okay? We'll get to that as we continue our study. But for the moment, I want you to see this. And by the way, I discuss this, I document this extensively in this book in a way that I've never seen developed in any other study of Daniel 9 or Luke for that matter. And that is this. 70 weeks are determined to seal vision and prophecy. So some say, well, yeah, it's just a prediction of the fall of Jerusalem. Here's what you have to catch. Every single constituent element of eschatology, the second coming, the judgment, the resurrection, the new creation, that is, the new heaven and new earth. In the Old Testament, every single one of those constituent elements is inextricably bound up with the predictions of the end times destruction of Jerusalem. Now, listen, folks, this is an astoundingly important fact. Let me say again, you've got to catch the power of this. The resurrection is tied to the destruction of Jerusalem and the temple in Isaiah 25, 1-8. The new creation, the new heaven and new earth is inextricably bound up with the time of the destruction of Old Covenant Israel, Isaiah 65, 13-19. Folks, this is one of the greatest oversights in historical studies of eschatology. To overlook the fact, or in some cases, to deny the fact, that every constituent element of biblical eschatology, once again, coming to the Lord, tied to the destruction of Jerusalem, Isaiah 66, 6-17. Again, I could go on and on. I don't want to take up all of my time on this. I'm simply driving home this absolutely critical point. When a person argues Okay? When a person argues, well, all that Daniel 9 is being told was that the fall of Jerusalem in AD 70 would fulfill prophecy, but that's all that would be fulfilled. And so it's not involving the coming of the Lord, judgment, resurrection. Those are beyond AD 70. That is a complete failure. A complete failure to understand that all of these Old Testament prophecies concerning the coming of the Lord, the judgment and the resurrection and the new creation are found in context that teach us, that show unequivocally, undeniably, and like I said, I document it completely in this book, that those constituent elements of eschatology would come as a direct result of the judgment on Jerusalem, the judgment on Old Covenant Judea and Jerusalem. Now, I know that's challenging, all right? I understand. I was not raised believing this. I was not raised hearing this. And so when I began to see it, I did an exhaustive study of all of these constituent elements of eschatology. The result of that was this book. All right. I've been piecing together all of these pieces for years and years. And in this book, I document in a way that, to my knowledge, you're not going to find in any other work how each of these constituent elements, I know this sounds redundant, but you really have to catch the power of it. Each and every constituent element of eschatology, foretold in the Old Testament, which means it's in the New, is inseparably bound up with the time of the destruction of Jerusalem and the destruction of the temple. You can't separate them. They're Siamese twins that cannot be separated. So, since that leads us to the view that you cannot separate the fall of Jerusalem from the time of the fulfillment of all things, because you see, if each and every constituent element of eschatology is bound up with the time of the fall of Jerusalem, then that means that by the time of the fall of Jerusalem in AD 70, each and every one of those constituent elements had to be fulfilled. And as we progress and continue in our study, I'm going to document that for you over and over, of how the destruction of Jerusalem is, in fact, the eschatological consummation. This is confirmed, and I only have a few moments here, all right? This is confirmed by Jesus' teaching about the fall of Jerusalem in AD 70. In a passage that virtually everyone, including dispensationalists, including historical premillennialists, certainly the amillennialists and the premillennialists and postmillennialists, and therefore virtually everyone admits that Luke chapter 21, verses 20 through 24, had to do with the Jewish war of AD 66 to 70 that consummated in the fall of Jerusalem in AD 70. All right? So Jesus said in that passage, when you see Jerusalem encompassed by the armies, then know that her desolation is nigh. Okay, that's directly parallel with Matthew 24, verse 15. When you see the abomination of desolation, spoken of by Daniel the prophet, whosoever reads, let him understand. Then let those who are in Judea flee. So the abomination of desolation is in some way connected to Jerusalem being surrounded by armies. It's inextricably bound up to that time and to those events. So, pardon me. I don't want to sneeze. I may have to. Jesus said, when you see, then flee. And he said this, these be the days of vengeance, in which all things that are written must be fulfilled. Must be. Did you catch that? Must be. It's from the Greek word dei. D-E-I is the way we would spell that in English. And it is a divine necessity. Now, how could Jesus say that the fall of Jerusalem in AD 70, it was a divine necessity for that to take place and fulfill all things that are written? Well, because number one, God is not a liar. God cannot lie. Hebrews chapter 6, 18 and following. So if God said all prophecy was to be fulfilled at the time of the fall of Jerusalem, then that's a divine necessity. It's unavoidable. And like I said just this morning on YouTube, more specifically on Facebook, I've had this guy tell me, no, Jesus didn't say those things. It couldn't be because the end didn't come. Daniel chapter 9 was not fulfilled. We haven't seen the 1,290 days. We haven't seen the 1,335 days. And this individual was imposing, just like all futurists do, was imposing a Hellenized, Grecianized concept of language onto the ancient Hebraic apocalyptic language. Failing or refusing in this individual's case to honor the metaphoric, figurative, spiritual understanding of that kind of language. But the point of fact is, here's Daniel predicting and saying abominations or desolations are determined until the appointed time. And here's Jesus saying, follow Jerusalem. These are the days of vengeance, when all things must be fulfilled. Well, listen, I'm out of time this morning. Thank you for joining me. Go to my website, order a copy of this book. You'll be glad you did. And I'll see you next week.